to mention a few, including Netflix, Nike, IBM, and other big industry factors. Our fourth speaker today is a very good friend of mine, Karidas Tshintsholo from SA. He's the co-founder of the Khula Farmers app. Karidas is a talented entrepreneur from South Africa with over 7 years experience in building startups from ideas to fully fledged businesses. He is passionate about finding inclusive, sustainable solutions for emerging markets. Karidas is the founder and CEO of one of Africa's top tech startups, which is Khula. This has his full-time attention. Khula is currently the #1 business app in South Africa. It is the #1 agricultural solution in South Africa, and it's growing in leaps and bounds, impacting thousands of farmers and bulk food buyers across South Africa, with its sights set on global emerging markets. Before I hand over to our moderator for the session, Dominic, I would just like to remind you, and I know that yesterday, I'm sorry that didn't go so well, I didn't see all of your questions, I promise you we'll get back to those today, is to please to continue to pop your questions that you have for our speakers in the chat box, and we will get back to you. The team is watching me, they'll be informing me, and we'll get back to you with these questions at the end of the session. I'd now like to hand over to Dominic Wilhelm, who's Dominic. Sorry, I'm going to change this way, excuse me. Welcome, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Tell us about this. Tell us about the systemic change. Tell us about the projects that you're currently running.
Sure. Before I do, I just want to congratulate you guys here. You guys have done an amazing job.
Thank you.
And for those of you who don't know, they've transformed a jetty into a studio, which is amazing. So there's lots of people running around here doing extraordinary things, not least of whom is Sune, and to you as well.
Thank you.
Things never run as smoothly as we hope, right?
But we manage.
Yeah, indeed. So the way I understand what you've asked me to do today is to share my personal story. And maybe that's of interest. So
stories are always of interest, and everyone has their own unique story.
Indeed, I agree. So I'll start by saying this. I think for most of my life, I've wanted to make a dent. I've had a fire in my belly to change things for the better. And I know that doesn't make me unique. But what I mean is that I wanted to make a dent in human malady, in planetary degradation, and also economic disparity. So when it comes to our maladies, we're all familiar with the challenges with health, with education, social disparities, etc. When it comes to our planet, a large chunk of which is just out there, it's beautiful, and we're not doing as good a job as we could at looking after it. And when it comes to economic maladies, there's such huge disparities and divides that just simply are not right and not just. So I wanted to address those things, but also when I look back on my life, I've realized that I've largely failed.
Why do you say that?
I've largely failed because I haven't had as fruitful an impact as I would have wanted. I haven't had the kind of impact which is sustainable and deep. I haven't seen it materialize. But then there are two events that have shaped me and shaped me profoundly. The first event led me to realize that, brought me to a point in my life where I realized that everything had changed and nothing had changed. And what led me to that realization is I discovered systems and design thinking, which is just another way of systems thinking is just another way of seeing the bigger picture. If that bigger picture is yourself, your family, your team, your organization, your country, your organization, the world, it's a useful way to see things. And design thinking is all about shaping things. And that gave me a very, very useful lens through which to focus my past. So my past, although it hadn't changed, it had changed, and everything had changed because I now had a useful lens through which to focus on it. That's the first event. And the second event that happened involved me speaking to several people who I certainly respect. They were confidential conversations. I invited them into a confidential conversations. and they're people that we know, well-known people.
Like who?
Well, they were confidential conversations.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So I assured them of confidentiality because I wanted a degree of confidentiality of what I was to share with them, what they would share with me. But the one question I took into the conversation, now drawing on systems thinking, is what is the deepest leverage point that you can think of to shape the kind of futures that we want? In other words, to make a dent on human malady, planetary degradation and economic disparity. What is the one thing? And without fail, every single one of them individually said that it was trust. Trust is the deepest leverage point. So anecdotally, we know that we're suffering from a global trust deficit disorder. But I asked myself, really, if we address trust, really, is it that deep leverage point? So I turned to the research and I discovered two things. The first thing is that trust is not a mystery. No. It comprises three, and this is what the literature tells us, which stretches back about 60 years. It comprises three very accessible, very human components. And those components are integrity, benevolence, and capabilities. Integrity, do you have an ethical and moral framework which is demonstrable, which you adhere to? When it comes to benevolence, do you keep the bigger picture in mind? Do you keep the other in mind? Or is your mission only about you? And the third component, capabilities, is do you have the wherewithal to do what you're proposing that you want to do? And with those three components, you have trustworthiness. And with those three, and with trustworthiness in the room, outcomes are better. And that takes me to the second realization when I looked at the research relating to trust. And that is there's an incredibly strong and evident correlation between trust and better outcomes. Yeah. On every level, across every dimension. So, for example, trust is a key indicator, and this is common sense. Trust is a key indicator to the longevity of personal relationships. High trust organizations outperform low trust organizations by 300%. High trust countries outperform low trust countries by 1,200%, which is profound. Yes. So, then a question emerged for me. If trust is understandable, there's a deficit of trust, and trust is a deep leverage point, then surely it makes sense to build trust for better outcomes. And so that's what led to trustXVII. I work with individuals, teams, organizations, and countries to understand the value of trust, how it applies to your mission, and how to measure those outcomes. So that's trustXVII. So where does that leave us here right now? So all you need really is a pen and paper to make a meaningful start with yourself, and ask yourself two questions. The first is, what is your sense of purpose? And the second is, how trustworthy are you? To the first one about purpose, it's not something that you fabricate, and it's something that may emerge over time, but we all have a purpose, and your purpose will emerge. So think about it, reflect on it, meditate on it, pray on it. Ask your friends and family, people close to you who you respect, perhaps people that you don't even know, but you respect. Ask them, to their mind, what is your sense of purpose? When they think of you, what is that? And that'll help your purpose emerge. So that's the first question you should ask yourself, or would be useful to ask yourself. And the second, to how trustworthy you are, ask yourself, and give yourself a score out of 10. Ask yourself, how benevolent are you? In other words, reflect and ask, to what extent do you keep the other in everything that you do to mind, or is this all about you? Ask yourself, do you have a sense of binding morality and efficacy? Simpler? Do you have a set of principles and values that you adhere to and which you demonstrate in your life? Can people see that? Or is it just a personal confession? Okay. And then finally, given your sense of purpose, do you have the capabilities to bring that purpose to life in the real world? And score yourself out of 10 for each. So say, for example, you scored yourself a 5 modestly out of all three. Add it up, you've got 15, and then divide it by 3. Okay, and then you have your trust score, which in this instance would be 5, and that's your trust indicator. Okay, and if you wanted it to be even more more meaningful or more accurate, ask others. maybe the same people that you asked about your sense of purpose in life. Ask them how much integrity they believe you have, benevolence you have, and capabilities you have. And use the same little formula and always average it out, and you'll have your trust indicator. Now you've got a journey. You've got an indicator to improve in life.
I like that.
So why is this perhaps inspirational? It's certainly been inspirational to me. The reason is if you're living out your life or your organizational sense of purpose with regards to trust, you are inevitably living systemically because you are keeping the bigger picture in mind, okay? And complementing that with design thinking, which of course puts the human condition at the center in all its fullness. It also asks the question of viability and feasibility. It can only increase your chances of shaping the system. And thirdly, trust is accessible. You don't need a special degree. You don't need any sort of special access. You don't need any kind of special privilege to understand what trust is and to exercise trust. So in doing that, you'll be living out a deep leverage point. And I would say that it is self-replicable at scale, but that's a whole different conversation. So there we are. That's my story.
I love that. Thank you for that, Dominic. I'm going to hand over to Adrian, who's going to do his presentation. I just have one more comment for you, a question actually very briefly. So I like the idea of being able to measure your trust indicator, and if people trust you and you trust yourself and you live by purpose and with intent as well and benevolent, as you say, it means that anything is possible. And it's great to hear that we can also work on that. You're not born. It means that actually all of us are born to be inspirators.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I love that. Thank you very much. So now I will be handing over to Adrian Jankowiak, who will be joining us from Nairobi, Kenya.
Hi there. Hi.
Hello, welcome.
And I'm here with Naitiamo as well.
Hello. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name.
That's okay. I'm used to it. So we've got. Sorry?
Sorry, I said please go ahead.
Wonderful. So would you? So I've got Naitiamo here as well. She's the art director on the project. So we're talking about Labeled Human today, and really two projects: Labeled Human and Paint the Court. So let us just show you. There we go. So Labeled Human is a campaign that started in 2018. At the London Design Biennale.
Yeah, we installed the Refugees Pavilion at the London Design Biennale, and the theme was emotional states. And we were bringing ahead the plight of the refugees. Wherever they go, refugees are always labeled refugees, no matter how much they contribute to the place they go to. And what we wanted to do was to break these labels and got to have more people share their labels, because we are all labeled something. We got over 2,000 cards filled, and these are some of the cards there.
So over 2,000 people, like Naitiamo said. Oops. Let me mute that one. So over 2,000 cards were filled, and we've carried on this campaign until 2020, and we incorporated it with this year's Nairobi Design Week.
So we had a week of jam sessions, a week of creative people coming together, and over 50 creatives came together to create a song called Labeled Human. So these are some dancers, skaters, basketballers. We had Paint the Court.
So Paint the Court is a creative community toolkit to deal with the problems you see on screen. And it brings together creatives from all backgrounds. So we had jam sessions, we had design workshops and an exhibition, and this invited permanent and temporary exhibitors. So the top left, you see that product was part of a residency that was run during the festival. and left. And then we had engineering. This again, the residency, you see the lights at the bottom left and the basketball hoop on the right. So these were all left at the venue of the festival for use by the community. At the same time, artists took part in mural painting. So they left over 50 meters of murals. We had mentors come in to do printmaking workshops. And of course, skateboarders, roller skaters, and basketballers to try out the entire setup. And also the musicians were really a key part. So this is where Labeled Human comes back in. And we had jam sessions, studio sessions, and production, and the entire Labeled Human music video, the entire song and the music video were created during the festival. So you can see we had a movie night as well, and the music video was created on the last day of the festival, and that's what we're about to show you now. So these are all the parts of our community coming together to create Paint the Court. And now we'll show you Labeled Human.
At the end of the day, we'll just label human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. At the end of the day, we'll just label human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. Tunasonga mbele, tunaenda wote. Tunasonga mbele, tunasonga mbele. Why can't we relate, yet we all be sane, tearing us to pieces for how we perceive this. We could not be tamed if we just made the change. At the end of the day, we're just labeled human. At the end of the day, we're just labeled human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. At the end of the day, we're just labeled human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. Tunasonga mbele. Voices so profound, not sure I might pronounce, yes. Reality, the sound that you keep finding freedom in the self, yeah. Endless fashion, endless world, transcendent light in my spiritual realm. Fluid purple energy, knowledge from life's water well. Kissing love and I had to tell. Kissing life and I had to tell. At the end of the day, we'll just label human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. At the end of the day, we'll just label human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. Tunasonga mbele.
A label Nina Saka, what do I call my name? Nina Chase, easy access. And will I take the name I was say one ataja? What you call the name of this guy making stanzas? Something they do freely cause labels are free, but labels ain't deep enough to be who you be. So ataka waitika, majina wanaita. You don't need the label to be, we're all human. Fight to change and 80, deep renegade, never been afraid. Dragon fire my breath, melt away the fears, dies away the fear, for rises off despair. A symbol for hope, don't despair, rise your head up high. To the sky with gaze and follow in the light of a star as I shine this path, labeled human.
At the end of the day, we'll just label human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. At the end of the day, we'll just label human. Learn from our mistakes, capable of change. Tunasonga mbele. Tunaenda wote. Tunasonga mbele. Tunasonga mbele. looking for this place where to stay with you,
So we'll just let that play out in the background with the credits. You can find more information about it at nairobidesignweek.com, and there's lyrics, credits. You can find the song on Spotify, Apple Music, and if you search labeled human on YouTube or on Google, you will also find it. So make sure you say hi to everyone who took part. We really appreciate everyone's support in this.
And let us all share our labels and make them insignificant. So at the end of the day, we are all labeled human.
And you can get involved on the hashtag labeled human. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love that. We're all human at the end of the day. Please stick around with us. We're going to do some Q&A later on. The next speaker that I'd like to introduce to you is Louis Prevost, a very good friend, runs an amazing incubator for social entrepreneurs in Cape Town, South Africa, works with a wonderful team. If you're a social entrepreneur, Louis is definitely the guy you need to speak to. Louis, welcome. Thank you for joining us today as one of our inspirators.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to see you today. I'm really happy to be here for the Open Design Africa, and thank you to all the team and to you for welcoming us and to allow me to share the amazing stories of our entrepreneurs. Well, Dominic said it really well just before. When you want long-term, deep and sustainable impact, it's all about seeing the big picture. And the fact is that the big picture is full of individuals. It's you, it's me, it's your neighbors, it's the people you know, it's the people you don't know. And all those individual stories have the power on a system level to bring change on the long-term perspective. So today I'm gonna share stories of small peoples that can bring big ideas that can change an entire system for long-term and sustainable impact.
Small is massive, as we say.
Small is massive, indeed. And more precisely, I'm going to share with you the stories of individuals, the small peoples who, by bringing each other's idea as a collective and through the power of ecosystem innovation, have the potential of rewiring the food system. So first of all, why do we need to rewire the food system? Well, to have a functional system, you have to get all the bits and parts of the system, and all those bits and parts have to be functional, inline, up and running. When you look at the big picture of the food system in South Africa and at larger scale in Africa, well, the picture is quite bad. Public authorities, academics, scientists, entrepreneurs, corporates, the message is the same, and it's been the same for a long time. We are living in a country, in a continent where food insecurity lies.
Yeah.
This is characterized mainly by a lack of access to healthy, safe, affordable, and culturally appropriate food, but also a lack of transparency in what we consume and how we consume and how we can consume, and a monopoly of the biggest actors, the biggest retailers that control the consumption of food at a larger scale, which leads to over-industrialization. All of this leads to major issues. 1 out of 5 South Africans experience hunger every day. About a third of the children in South Africa experience stunting, leading to learning difficulties, for example. So when you see a system and you have one part that is missing, one part that is not running correctly, the entire system is broken. Here, it seems that all the parts are broken and not functional. So how do we get long-term solutions? How do we bring ideas together in order to tackle systemic issues all at the same time? Well, with Oribi and partners, we gathered 43 entrepreneurs at all levels of the food value chain. We gathered solutions in farming, in growing. We gathered solutions in logistic distribution in order to open new channels of distribution, new ways of supplying food, of accessing food. And finally, product innovation, new product to consume, and B2C solution, new access to food. And all those 43 entrepreneurs, we made them work as a whole on the entire system with a 3-step solution. Quite simple to understand. First, you need to activate individual business potentials, which means give back power to individuals. Secondly, you have to connect to the individuals. You have to connect individual solution to foster the creation of networks. And finally, you have to enable access to untapped market at large scale. So we're going to go through each one of these steps right now.
Oribi Village in Cape Town is an incubator for social enterprises. There's 3 programs that we focus on. The one is the incubation of entrepreneurs that focus on food systems. So the food entrepreneurs that we have, they vary from people that manufacture food, they process food, they grow food, or they've developed very clever systems so that more people have access to healthy and quality food.
We focus on a farming method called decentralized home farming, where we believe that we don't need big farms to feed multiple cities. If every one of us becomes our own mini farmers and we work together by creating these networks, then we can make a change.
My hope is to this hub, that women's hub, to be growing more and more. My dream is we want to create jobs for the women who haven't got jobs. That project, yeah, it make a big difference for the women in that community. They respect that project because I really am taking the women from the grassroots. I uplift them.
So here, yeah, it's all about taking, as she said, taking human to the grassroots and uplift them. By focusing on the individuals, we are able to develop what we call decentralized business hubs that can bring back power in access, in what you consume, in how you consume, bring more governance for people around their food, more skills development, more capacity. And with individual solutions like that, results are really amazing. Like for this specific solution, you could grow more or less 100 plants per square meter. So imagine the amount of food that you can produce at an individual basis. Secondly, we focus on solutions that can create ecosystems through collaboration.
PETI is a city agency that works with the greater central suburbs of Cape Town. And what they do is improve business access and infrastructure so that employment opportunities can be improved in the greater Philippine area as well.
Monday, we send our availability list to Upedi, and then Upedi confirms what they need is this, that, and that, and in so many quantities. Then on a Thursday, we then harvest those quantities that they need in varieties of food. And then UCook comes and collect all the foods from these different gardens.
The really cool thing about that is that, you know, within 2 days, it goes from being harvested straight from a farm in Kailicha and delivered, you know, to their clients in the rest of Cape Town. And they're supporting small-scale farmers in their own city.
So systemic change is all about trust, actually. Dominic said it just before as well. And how can you bring trust when you're a small-scale actor, when you're a farmer in the township, when you're an individual chef, when you have a small restaurant? How do you bring trust? Well, there's quite a simple way to bring trust. It's all about collaborate to compete. When small-scale actors come up together, they have the ability to have more strengths, to improve the way they share information, to improve the way they give greater access to alternative distribution channel. They improve their potential to bring economic opportunities at a local and large scale. And finally, by bringing small-scale actors together, you have the ability to reduce risks and costs. So like Pedi, gathering 63 small-scale farmers, you have here the opportunity to give back 85%, for example, of direct revenue to farmers while producing 35 tons of fresh produce. And the third step is all about
I was testing and developing
new
new distribution models for social innovations like solar lights in rural areas in KwaZulu-Natal when I realized that there were actually more pressing needs for low-income consumers. They shop in informal stores that serve millions of customers every day in Africa, and yet these stores lack connection to formal economy, which means that they have a difficult access to affordable stock or to finance solutions. The rapid growth of mobile technologies and the internet penetration is a fabulous opportunity to connect these stores and improve the lives of the store owners as well as the low-income consumer. That's why with my team, we developed Shop It, a mobile app that enables informal grocery store owners to compare prices at wholesalers, buy all their stock directly from their phone at the best price, and we then deliver it to the doorstep within a few hours using an Uber-like model, creating jobs for local drivers.
Shabit macnaha adigoo dukaankaada joogo oo meelna aad u dhaqaaqin aad ku helayso macnaha wax alla waxaad u baahan tahay fadhigaada lagu keenayo oo waqtina ka dhimin oo ganacsigaadana aadan ka tagin.
We save traders between 5 to 10% of the cost of their stock, increasing their income by 20%. We built a community of 4,000 informal traders. Our app is integrated with payment and logistics solutions and with wholesale management software, making it easily scalable. We're currently attracting 100 new stores per week, and we want to accelerate and reach 30,000 stores in South Africa within 2 years and start expanding in other countries.
So yeah, you see, the last step is all about bringing access to informal markets that are very often unconsidered, and yet they are the closest to the population in need. They are the more flexible. They are the more able to answer the needs of disadvantaged communities. So here, the last step of our system thinking is all about opening those new market opportunities that can really act at a grassroots, local, but large scale. So yeah, you just met 3 of the solutions we are focusing on. We have 43, so imagine what we can do with 43 entrepreneurs, and it's just the start. We just started. So now I'd like you to join us in that movement. If you have solutions around food, if you have systemic solution to fight food insecurity, please contact us, join us, and yeah, that's just the start of a big movement for change. Thank you.
I love it, Louis. And I love the theme that's happening. It goes back to the trust. Dominique, we're going to have a discussion around that. But before we get there, some questions for you as well, Louis. Before we get to that, I'd like to introduce Karidas from the Khula app, a very good friend. Saw him last week still. Karidas, welcome. I'm very, very curious as to what you are going to be sharing with us. Tell us your story.
Hi, Ellen, everyone. I hope you guys are able to hear me.
Yes, we can.
Are you guys doing good?
We're very good.
Are you guys
very
doing
good.
well?
Thank you. Yes, we are very good. We're inspired. We've had a good morning talking about trust, and you build on into that, Karidas. So please share your story and inspire all of our listeners today and viewers.
I don't know about inspiring them, but I'll share my journey. I think my journey's been very much a sort of design, but from an entrepreneurship perspective. I think I've gone through a journey in my entrepreneurship career where I've been solutioning for inclusive solutions that are inclusive for emerging farmers, or let me say emerging markets, that consider emerging markets, that consider, that basically coming up with sustainable solutions. And one of these solutions, and one that's paramount, has been the work that we have been doing with the Khula app. And it's been quite an interesting story where I'm now in an industry that I did not start out in. I studied actuarial science at the University of Cape Town, started my first business while I was there. Somehow my business partner and I decided that dropping out would be the best way to go. You can imagine our parents were not too happy about that. But looking back, I still think it was probably the best decision I've ever made in my life, or at the very least, top 3. And once we came to Joburg and we ran that business for quite some time, my business partner had the opportunity to go to Israel. And when he came back from Israel, he kept raving about how this country that's basically a desert had so much agricultural output, pretty much more agricultural output than what you would find in a lot of African countries, which made very little sense because Africa has about 60% of the world's arable land. We have enough land to feed the world 10 times over, yet we're still importing about $40 billion of food into the continent. This was quite shocking to us. There's just a video playing in the background, which I think will put some color into some of what I'm saying in terms of where I come from, and in terms of the work that we've been doing with Khula. And when he came back, we started really, I think at the time, I guess from a design thinking perspective, we're not really clear on what exactly the problem in the industry was, but we had a sense in terms of that the industry was big and there was a really big problem, but at the time, the clarity in terms of what the actual problem in the industry was. And what we did from there, we started zooming into the industry and taking a much closer picture. And we spent about 18 months with some farmers out in Hammanskraal and Eikenhof, and trying to understand some of the challenges that they were going through. And the thing that came out was just how difficult it was or is for them to actually sell their products regularly and consistently into a formal market. And obviously you are aware of the history that South Africa has, where we've got a history that we are certainly not proud of, where you've got a lot of first generation farmers and you've got a lot of farmers who are in their 5th generation or in their 6th generation. And the way agriculture works is that you find that the first generation guy may have started planting, the 2nd generation guy may have built a pack house, the 3rd generation guy may have integrated something else. So you have a lot of first generation farmers in the market competing in a market where there's a lot of farmers who've been in the game for a very long time. And the way the system was designed was almost designed pretty much for an emerging first generation guy to fail. Because the only way an emerging first generation guy could sell their products was pretty much through the fresh produce marketplace. And by taking their product to the fresh produce marketplace, and this is still live, this is still ongoing, the farmer is not guaranteed the price that the product is going to sell. So when they harvest, they basically hope for the best in terms of what price their product is going to sell at. Secondly, they sell their products. Those are some visuals actually at the fresh produce marketplace. So it's sold on consignment as well. So you're not guaranteed at what price your product is going to sell at. Two, you're not guaranteed if your product is even going to sell at all. And because you're dealing with fresh produce, you're dealing with a perishable product. So if it doesn't sell today, it's not the same price tomorrow. So it's not like shoes or a t-shirt. So if spinach doesn't sell on a Monday, Tuesday spinach is not the same price if it's been out the ground for a day later. So farmers have to deal with all this incredible uncertainty. And then beyond that, they have to pay a fee. So they have to pay high fees. So they have to pay a fee to the actual fresh produce market, which is owned by the municipality. That's around about a 5 to 7% fee. Over and above that, they also have to pay another fee that would go to the agent at the fresh produce marketplace. But because these are first generation guys, they generally don't have the right connects to deal with the big agent. So that's created a bunch of agents who are linked to agents. Now you can imagine you're paying another 5 to 7% to an agent. You're paying another 2.5% to an agent that links you to an agent, And for us as numbers guys, as finance guys, as from an actuarial background, the numbers just did not make any sense whatsoever. And as we dug deeper, the problem became even more apparent, where if you follow the price journey of food, it's quite insane. So you find that an emerging farmer will produce spinach, and that spinach usually, if it's off season, or if it's during the season, it will sell for about 150 to 250. And then another big wholesaler will pick up that exact same spinach from that farmer. Usually it's in a bunch that's yay big. They split that bunch into two, and then that spinach will effectively go for about 10 Rand for that same bunch that the farmer would have delivered. Sure. And then once it's delivered to a processor, the processor takes that spinach, splits it even more, puts it in some packaging, and then sells it to a retailer for about 16 Rand. And then you find that when you and I actually buy chopped spinach at Woolies or whatnot, if you do some cooking, you will be aware that chopped spinach at Woolies goes for, I think, about 36 Rand. And the farmer only was able to redeem about 2.50 Rand of that entire value chain. And on the 2.50 Rand, they have to pay incredible fees. So we had to think, I guess, from a design perspective, how do we basically find a sustainable way to connect the farmer or to level the playing field between the first generation guys and the guys who've been in the industry for years, and sustainably connect them to a market where they can be able to grow. And this was the advent of what we've now called the Khula ecosystem. Initially, when we set out, it was a lot about connecting the farmer with the marketplace. But then, because I think the key to how we thought about and how we built the business, we don't come in with assumptions. And I think that's something that's really helped us a lot. We read from the market, and going in, we quickly realized that in this industry, you cannot solve problems in isolation. Because they're such age-old and century-old problems, you realize that actually you can't solve connecting a farmer to a formal marketplace unless you're solving for logistics. In the same breath, if you don't know how the stuff is going to get there, you can't solve for that. In the same breath, you cannot solve the quality problem unless you're able to connect the farmer with the right advice and the right input supply. And in the same breath, it's very difficult to set up to get a farmer, because our big thing is to move farmers from emerging and move them into commercial. And it's very difficult because, for example, setting up a pack house can 20 million Rand just to set up a pack house for a farmer. And that's why we've also come up with a funded dashboard where we essentially are able to link these farmers with the right kind of financing. In South Africa, you have a lot of financing institutions that sit in Sandton or that sit in Cape Town in nice air-conditioned offices, but the mandate that they have, or the farmers that they're supposed to be funding, are not in Cape Town and they're not in Sandton. Those farmers, they sit in Thohoyandou, they sit in Messina, they sit in Hazyview, they sit on the outskirts of the country. And the odds of that fund that's set out to support emerging farmers that's sitting in Sandton and them linking up with the farmer in Thohoyandou is very low. And hence, we've decided to harness our database to connect farmers not only with markets, but also come in from an input perspective, but also be able to connect them to funders. And that's how we've thought about the solution that we have built and the solution that we have put out. I'm not timing myself, so Ellen, maybe give me a young wink.
You've got 1 minute.
I've got 1 minute. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. But pretty much that's sort of an overview of the journey that we have taken. And also from a design perspective, we haven't been too rushed in a rush to sort of fully open the platform. What we've done is that we've approached buyers and we've approached farmers, and we've said, hey, look, we're trying to build something that's going to solve problems for you in this way in the market. And we have buyers and farmers actively using our platform. But the mindset that they're using it with is not so much, hey, this thing is going wrong, therefore I'm throwing it away. It's, hey, guys, can you do this? Can you refine that? So we're actually allowing the farmers to help us build a platform that works for them. And in the same breath, we're doing the same with the buyers. And it's been quite an exciting journey where we've gone from working in my lounge to now having a team of about 20 people. We've just closed off our seed investment round in July, and we're going to be beginning our national rollout in the new year with some of the big retailers who are already using our platform. And because we got them in as test users and asked them to help us build it, they've been helping us refine it. So the way we approached even how we build the platform has been interesting. Our team has grown significantly. We've added more people. I'm going to rush through the slides. We've also
No, don't rush. You get time, Karidas, you do.
I have time. All right, cool. So even in terms, okay, you've given me one extra. That's one for friendship. Cool. So even with our team, we've added a whole lot more expertise. And even with how we're building the buyer platform, that was the most difficult part. How do we build something that a Woolies is going to use, or that a Pick and Pay, or that a Spar is going to use regularly? And what we've done there, essentially, instead of us, I think it's always very important to also know that you're not the smartest guy in the room, or to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. Yeah. So what we've done, we've actually gone and poached someone from Spar, the guy who was their head buyer there, Alistair Smith. And he would have been the guy that we would have been pitching to a Spar and asking him to use our platform. And he's come in and he's basically building a platform and bringing in the years of experience that he's had at Spar. He was managing about a 3 billion rand budget while he was there. And that basically has increased our chances of success in terms of how we built the platform. So the platform is not coming from my brain and me being a wizard, or from Matt being a wizard. We're actually allowing the users to drive the building of the platform, both from a farmer perspective and from a buyer perspective. We've also put together an advisory board. We've got additional members, but this is the first draft, where we put together some of the strongest voices in the industry that are basically helping us to build this platform. And we feel that we have a much higher chance of success if we actually let the users build the platform instead of me or Matt or any of my team sitting there and being wizards. And that's the approach that we've taken. We've also taken an approach where we've managed expectation. And this is a map roughly of the farmers that are on our platform. That number, this is actually an outdated map. We've got about 4,200 in the pilot at the moment. And what we've done, we used to find ourselves in a position where we'd have to reject a lot of farmers because they don't necessarily meet the spec to supply to buyers. Because, for example, if you're supplying McDonald's with a tomato, it's not just a tomato. Even if it's good quality, it's not a red tomato, it's a champagne red tomato. And it's got a specific radius and all of that kind of stuff that they need. And we've given, instead of just rejecting those farmers, we're using our input marketplace as a tool, as a drive where they can get the right sort of advisory that will get them over the line. But in a nutshell, from a design thinking perspective, we've come into an industry that was not natural to us. And I think we've come this far because we have not come from a perspective of being the smartest guy in the room. We've actually listened, we've heard the concerns, and we've aggregated a solution upon hearing the concerns. And not only have we done that, we've also let the users take the lead. So the retailers, the wholesalers, your fruit spots, the people who are going to be using our platform are the people who are driving the dev process, and they're instructing us in terms of what will work for them and what will not work for them. and hence we've also brought Alistair onto the team. We've got high hopes for this across the continent. We've been approached by the Kenyan government, Malawi, a couple of governments across Africa, even outside the continent. And we needed to basically put ourselves to have discipline, to not just go out and put something out there that we're not fully confident of, and continue running this pilot. And we think it's going to make a big change, especially with allowing the first generation guys to have a level playing field and to mitigate a lot of the challenges that currently exist and that have been existing for centuries. And that's pretty much what we do at Khula. And that's sort of a snapshot in terms of where we're at. We're always thinking, we're always solutioning. I'm sure you can see the board behind me. We're always having sessions, and we're always questioning and refining how we're moving forward, and we're letting our users define how we build the platform going forward. And I think in closing, my big view is that when it comes to solutioning for emerging markets and for groups that are previously excluded, we must never come from the perspective of charity. We must never come from the perspective of help the needy, or in SA, as you might call it, BEE, because that's not sustainable. When a crisis like COVID hits, you realize that a lot of things begin to suffer because corporates will start letting go of those things that they were doing for good. So we need to be concerned about building actual value that sticks. Even in our case this year, it's been a tough year overall, but we've had a pretty good year because of, even during the crisis, because of the value that we bring to the table. And even the corporates that work with us based on that value. And I think in solutioning for excluded groups, in solutioning for disadvantaged groups, we need to think about value and not come from a charity perspective, because that's going to last 2 years, it's going to last 3 years, and then it's going to go bust. But if we can build actual value, and that's how we're viewing our emerging farmers, and that's our long-term approach. If you let me go on, I can go on forever.
I was just about to stop you, Karidas. I was just about to stop you. Karidas, thank you so much. I'm joined here today with Dominic. He kicked off the session, a specialist, I think, not only from a theoretical perspective, but from the way that he runs his business as well. And also the theme being that all of our speakers today that have kicked off today's Global Inspiration Day all work systemically. And they all prove that there's, it's not only a nice to have or because we're creative people, it's actually a core business a value add. We've got questions that are coming through, but I'm going to actually hand over to Dominic, he's also got lots of questions. So you have to stop, I have to stop. Dominic, over to you.
Yeah, the most troubling question I have here is I saw on your video that you had these little shrubs on your chin, and now you've got a raging face of foliage. How did that happen? Are you eating something out of your supply chain that?
No, we blame COVID. They closed down the hair salons.
Look, one thing two things that came to mind when you were speaking is a shift from, being a brittle supplier or a brittle business towards more resilience. And in that respect, resilience isn't about policy and it cannot be politicized. It's all about adding value and sustainable value and moving from charity to sustainability. Now, that's just a context for my question. You very obviously are taking the bigger picture in mind, the full value chain in mind, the full supply chain. What do you think is the most effective point of entry to interact with that full value chain, to bring about the systemic change that you're wanting to bring about? What's the most powerful point of interaction you have found along the full value chain?
I think there's been multiple points. I think it's been an array of points, but I think at the crux of it, it's really understanding pain points. I think for us, it's been built around understanding what the buyer's pain points are, because in as much as you think that if the buyer buys from emerging farmers, then that's all they need to do and that's all that's in it for them. But we've had to truly assess their pain points and their struggles in terms of how they're buying. So for example, we've actually realized through our conversations with a lot of the big buyers and the big supermarket chains that actually they are also not happy with what's happening at the fresh produce market. It's not transparent, especially I think COVID has brought this to the fore. So for example, you might stay at home, wear your mask, you might even be in a nice shell and make sure you don't interact with everyone. But then you go to the shops and you buy a banana, for example. And that banana was actually probably sitting at the fresh produce market earlier in the day, and people were busy holding it and moving it around. But you might, for example, contract COVID through that, you know? So even the transparency in the value chain is something that's majorly lacking. And we had to really spend time and understand what their pain points are. And I think the key word in terms of how we've built this ecosystem solution is in understanding the different pain points. So once you understood the buyer's pain points, we then were able to match them with the farmer's pain points. So we didn't see the buyer as the savior in the supply chain who just comes in and just buy. They actually an active member and an active user within the supply chain, and they had specific pain points. And now that Alistair's been on the team as someone who's worked in there for years and years, he actually knows all the big pain points, and we've been able to build a solution for those pain points and basically build some. So the key word I would say in building something sustainable, be it a tech product or be it a business, is in solving a pain point in such a way that if you're not there, your user or your customer must be in a worse position. They must work with you because of the value that you are adding. And the beauty of coming in as an outsider from an industry that we don't come from naturally, is that the things that everyone found to be normal, we actually found to be shocking. So a lot of the things, because we came in with that outside perspective, it allowed us to, I guess, see things from a different view, and then integrating that with experience, with including the buyers, it's made a really big change. But ultimately, it's about pain points and solving for pain points, I would say.
Great, thanks. So you're a provider of less pain in the world.
That's what we're aspiring to be.
Great. Now, talking about pain points, your base is entrepreneurialism, and you're focused on food security. But if I could just ask this question in the context of entrepreneurialism, not only food security. Entrepreneurs are very good at addressing pain points. What, to your mind, other than food security, are the biggest problems that entrepreneurs in the world today should be addressing?
Sure.
Well done, Dominic.
Well, there's many, and I think that as pain points, you can't take one pain point at a time. You have to address several pain points. Otherwise, it pains. If it doesn't pain on the foot, it pains in the head, and you're still in pain.
Yeah.
So even if you consider food security, for example, you have to. It relates to issues in education. Children experiencing stunting will have learning difficulties. If you take climate change, food is related to climate change. It's related to water issues. It's related to, so again, you see the big picture. If food security is linked to climate change, is linked to water, is linked to, so unfortunately, there's not one issue to focus on for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say that entrepreneurs are just a food entrepreneur is an innovator, is a change maker on a global perspective. He should encompass all the different issues at several levels and not focus only on his specific area. But otherwise, I'd say education first, food security, climate.
Yeah. So from hearing you correctly, yes, there are important problems in the world today that can be somewhat overwhelming, but you would encourage entrepreneurs, as fundamental to the entrepreneurial approach is to see the bigger picture, have that hardwired in there, and to see the interconnectivity of what they're doing and how it relates to. That reminds me of innovation. That really, innovation really is about seeing the bigger picture and spotting new connections, right?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, what we really like to do with our entrepreneurs, and part of our methodology in design thinking, is addressing others' issues. So if you're an entrepreneur, farming entrepreneur, for example, we're going to ask you to work on your neighbor's distribution solution. And by understanding his pain points, you are able to adapt and to address his needs. So to develop your solution in order to be aligned with other issues at larger scale. So that's, yeah, the bigger picture is not about your solution. It's about other solutions and others' issues.
I just want to point out that Adrian is still on the call with us.
Yes, I was going to go back. I was going to say, can we go to Nairobi now? Adrian, hi. So as you well know, Adrian, as I'm sure you could write a book on, at the center of design thinking is this notion of putting the human condition, which is it's a very big thing. And often the language we use when we talk about the human condition as it relates to design thinking is needs. What are human needs? And then you build out from that. But my question to you is, in contemplating the work that you've done and shifting away from these individual labels to a broader label, a more essential label, a more meaningful label of human, in your experience, in your team's experience, what is it that humans are aspiring to be, other than those labels that they have been labeled with? So you're moving away from those labels to be human, but what does that mean? What do those aspirations include?
Thanks for that great question. I think Natima might have something.
Well, I do feel like deep down within us, we aspire to be like a child is. So the characteristic of a child does not hold a grudge. A child sees the beauty in things. You often see a child skipping by themselves even when they're alone, because for some reason they're in a beautiful world full of exploration and curiosity. And I feel deep down that is what I aspire to be. And from conversations with people, we are always geared towards that simplicity of being innocent and loving and just playing, exactly.
Yeah.
Music, dance, creativity.
That's wonderful. So it's forgiving, generous and sharing. It's an intense curiosity and also simplicity. So those are, to my mind, and forgive me if I'm framing this incorrectly, but those to my mind are extraordinary values. With regards to aspirations of the people in your community that you have engaged, what do those aspirations include? Not only the values, but what do they want to do vocationally? How do they express their calling and in terms of what they want to bring to their community and the world?
What we really love about our community is that everyone really is passionate about the thing they do. So from the muralists that you saw during the music video, and Finnish, the music producer who's in his early 20s and just dropped his first album, and the dancers just doing dancing, and that's how we found them, and that's how we came across these people, because they either reached out to us or we came across some of their art, and we all love creating. So wouldn't it be amazing if we could all come together to create things that have more of a purpose and more impact together?
Yeah, indeed. And just, I've been asked to bear trust in mind. So I'm going to ask 3 questions, and it fits, to my mind at least anyway, quite nicely. I'm going to ask you a question about capabilities with reference to entrepreneurialism. To you, Adrian, and forgive me, I forget your business partner's name, but thank you. I'm sorry, the sound here isn't that great. So, but I'm going to ask you a question about benevolence, because of course, to design thinking, empathy is very important. And to you, Karidas, I'm going to ask about integrity. Okay, question relating to integrity. So let me start with you, Karidas. Where, to your mind, has there been a breakdown in integrity with regards to the supply chain and food?
Cool.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I got that. Sheesh, I think there's a lot, eh? I think there's so much wrong. But I think my biggest issue is, I guess, from an integrity point of view or from an empathetic point of view, is that, you know, the plight of the first generation guy or the emerging guys has been normalized. So it's been, I don't know how to best communicate it, but the struggles that they go through, the fact that they live hand to mouth, their struggles in growing, it's been accepted by the industry and industry players as the norm. And it does not bother anyone. It does not move the needle with anyone. And I think for me, from an integrity perspective, you know, it's really questionable that society can actually move to a point where we can normalize someone's plight, if that makes sense, or we can normalize someone's struggle. And I think because it's so widespread and known throughout the chain, it's just, yeah, for me, that's the biggest breakdown that I see in the industry, is that everyone is okay with knowing that someone else is really not okay, or with knowing that the system does not allow for someone else to be okay. And as long as I'm fine, and as long as things are going well for me, I'm not going to get out of my way to make it okay for the next guy. And I think that's a challenge. And at the same time, the opportunity, I guess, in the industry where the plight of the first generation guy, the emerging guy, has been normalized. All the stuff that they go through is not unknown, it's not secret, it's actually known. And for me, there's no integrity, I guess, to an extent, if you can go on knowing that someone is good at your plight, or knowing that you are disadvantaging them. Like the guys who takes the 250 rand spinach, splits it up, sells it for 10 rand, they know they know exactly the markup they're making. They know exactly what they're getting from the farmer. They're well aware of how that they're benefiting at the price of that particular farmer. And for me, that, because the problems are so many, I could always point them out. But the bigger problem across for me is that the industry is just okay with the plight of these guys. And it's been normalized, and it sits well on everyone's conscience. Not everyone sleeps well at night, knowing that this is ongoing. And that for me is the biggest breakdown, I guess.
So I'm hearing two things. The one is that there's a systemic breakdown in integrity throughout the value chain. But the paradox is that there's also a very, very tight and clear understanding of integrity or ethics and abiding ethics, but for the minority of people in that value chain. In other words, there is a system in play, but it benefits the very few. And that has normalized really injustice throughout the whole value chain. Okay, cool. Thank you, Karidas. And guys in Nairobi, when it comes to benevolence, in order to have the other in mind, we need to activate empathy. So how do we do that? How do we activate empathy as an act of design thinking in order to be more benevolent, to have the other in mind? How do we do that?
We've just plugged the mics in, hoping you can hear us better.
Yeah. Is it better?
Much better. Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would say more thinking in design towards human-centered design, in that we need to think about how what we are designing, we need to think about the end user as we are designing any product or any service whatsoever. Because as the theme is, as one of we use the word Ubuntu, I am because we are. We need to think about what affects me and put ourselves in other people's shoes. So I'd say for us to approach design in a very human-centered way would help with benevolence in design.
And how do you do that? How do you get into someone else's shoes to activate, to use more technical language, to activate those mirroring neurons, so we are actually experiencing the other's plight or their joy? How do we do that? How do we embody a human-centered design approach?
Ask why and listen, really. Those are the important things to us. And you mentioned empathy. Empathy is really crucial. We really split how we structure our lives actually currently into two emotions, and those are structure and empathy. And really, without, you may have empathy and you're able to show empathy, but without structure to what you're doing, it may not have the impact that you're desiring. So that's something that we've been really thinking about a lot, and listening to people, and listening rather than, the last 5 years really of Nairobi Design Week's community has been listening and finding out what is a Kenyan design week? How is it different, and what does it do specifically for Nairobi and for Kenya? So it's been about discovery. So really listening intently and repeating the question why.
Yeah, there's always something to learn from someone else. So approach it like you do not know what is gonna happen, and approach it in a way that let someone explain their truth to you.
Let someone explain their truth to you. That's wonderful. So why and listen is your response to the benevolence question, really to act in an effort to activate empathy. Okay, and now to the question of capabilities. I sense, and I would agree with you, that it's difficult to boil down questions to yes, no, especially big questions, to yes, no answers. But let me try and do it anyway. When it comes to entrepreneurs, what do you think are the most important capabilities that they can bring to the table to achieve what they want to achieve?
I think that it all comes down to first openness, and as our friends in Nairobi, like, think like a kid. A kid will play with friends, will trust friends. As soon as there's no more trust, you don't play with them anymore. So if you have no one to play with, you can't bring any solutions up. So first, it's to be open, to understand the needs and objectives of the people you're evolving with. I think as well, the value of inclusion lies more and more, and should lies more and more into entrepreneurs' mind. For that, South Africa is kind of a case study. Why most successful entrepreneurs are white, why most of them are sometimes coming from abroad, how to give access, how to allow trust to be more inclusive, to be more open, how to allow a new system to emerge. Right now, we see many limits into the corporate world, into the monopolistic vision of some of the big actors of the business industry. How to allow an economic revolution on informal markets, for example. For that, entrepreneurs must be really strong in showing that we can trust them, even if they don't have a strong educational background, even if they are not coming from, even if they are coming from disadvantaged areas, they have huge potentials. They have even more potentials because they know where they come from. They know the needs and the huge needs and the huge amount of economic opportunities, of business opportunities that it represents. So I would say that, thinking inclusion, because the more people you target, the more successful your business will be.
Yeah. Okay, so out of the gates, your answer to capabilities, and specifically the most important capabilities that entrepreneurs can have in the world today, was openness and the willingness to play. But then you very quickly made the connection between the willingness to play and trust. You need to trust, and that's not only the investor or those seeking out entrepreneurs trusting the entrepreneurs, but it's also the entrepreneurs' ability to build that trust as well, to attract the type of attention.
Trusting themselves.
Yes, trusting themselves. Absolutely. Okay, so I've been signaled that it's time to wrap. Thank you so much for joining us from Nairobi and Josie. Karidas, I suspect you're in Josie, right? Thumbs up. Okay, cool. And from here in Cape Town at the Jetty, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I feel like this conversation just should continue, but I know that a lot of you have signed up to the virtual speakers virtual room to have questions with them. So please remember to use the Zoom link mailed to you when you sign up for that the session that you booked for. Alternatively, for those of you that have not signed up, we invite you to stick around and enjoy our entertainment break with local musician Al Peterson. Remember to tag Design Design Afrika and to use our official hashtags when you share on social media, hashtag ODA 2020, hashtag Open Design Africa, hashtag small is massive. Thank you to my speakers. We'll be back at 11:20 to introduce the Futures Program with Dr. Julia Stamm from Berlin. But now let's have a quick break, and also let's enjoy and welcome Cape Town musician Al Peterson. Thank you, guys.